and care homes have changed a lot in recent years. I've been speaking to Paul Rogers, a senior architect at CMS Architects in Corsham. They design all sorts of medical facilities. I began by asking him what was unique about designing a medical building as opposed to anything else.
The main issue with the medical building type is obviously the environments you need to create are very specific to that building use. And it's not just in terms of how people use the space, but it's the mechanical and electrical equipment that goes in there, the lighting, how air handling is used. What we tend to promote is what we call sort of passive design, so using natural light as much as possible and natural ventilation to really make the well-being of the space promoted. Obviously, if anyone going into health buildings are usually, in terms of patients, are nervous and apprehensive, so it's trying to make people as comfortable as possible and a sort of welcoming base, really.
Hospitals did used to be very functional buildings, and I imagine a lot of that was to do with, as you've just alluded to, the amount of technical equipment that had to be accommodated in there. How big a change have we gone through to start actually looking at the aesthetics of a building as well as its function?
A long way, I think. There's always been, obviously, the guidance in terms of the technical requirements of a space. What you get is there's a lot of guidance by the NHS in terms of health building notes. It's really set out what they want in every space in terms of the facts of the space, if you like, and the equipment and the temperature and the ceiling height. But what's coming a lot more now is, I say, the aesthetics and bringing in art and cutting down on signage. So you're using colours a lot more, really to allow people to orientate themselves a lot better in the space without sort of panicking on too much signage and sort of not seeing the wood for the trees, if you like. So using colours on the flooring, on the walling, artwork is being a lot more incorporated into health now. And most big health projects have an art coordinator, and it can sometimes even be part of the planning permission in terms of a condition for art to be incorporated into that.
So you would probably say one of the big trends that we've seen then is the installation of art in these places. What are the outdated features that, as a designer, you would no longer include? If you think about that traditional image of a waiting room, for example, what's gone that used to be there?
It tends to be the more defined spaces, if you like, the segregation and the areas. Everything's a lot more flexible now and more open plan. If you walk into most of the new hospitals now, and they're more like shopping centres, and in terms of the entrance foyer, there's a lot more space and volume. Space is precious, and the amount of building is costs money, but it's really, boosting that volume of space. So receptions and waiting areas, they've allowed them to grow, so you can get accessibility in terms of wheelchairs and mums with pushchairs and families in there, and just really making the whole environment more relaxing to really assist with the patients who are on edge and nervous, and to cut down on any confrontation where, people are getting stressed with the staff. It's really just sort of trying to make a more relaxing environment for anyone coming in and using those services. And it seems to help the staff in terms of observation. That's one of the key things now, is obviously staff observing the spaces. There's no sort of hidden corners and dead ends and things anymore.
It's interesting. It sounds like you've got an awful lot to consider here, because you've got the functionality of all the equipment. The staff, as you point out, have got to be able to see everywhere and move around carefully. How do you go about designing these places? Where do you start?
Well, once you've got your brief for the project and what their aspirations are, we generally hold a number of sort of workshop environments with the key stakeholders, which is usually the main NHS contact, the facilities department. So maintenance is always considered from the outset, and how they're going to actually maintain these facilities, the staff and the end users. And then more often than not, with some of the larger projects, public consultation, where we open it up to patients and the wider community. And there's quite a lot of community involvement, which is promoted right from the outset, when really the layout and the proposals are still very sketchy.
And you've designed A&E units in the past, so in an example of an A&E, how involved would doctors and nurses get in this process?
Very involved. I say some of the more recent ones we've done, usually the key stakeholder from the departments involved in that space, which are going to be using it day in, day out. because it's all very well. We find you've got these health building notes and room data sheets which set out the very specific criteria, but the people that are using those spaces often have a different take on that and often want something slightly different from how it's set out. For example, on some where you've got the single rooms with how they use the accessible toilet facilities and where your grab rails are and things, it's actually talking to the users, which are going to be in there day in, day out, assisting patients, how they want to use that space.
I wonder how you judge how it's worked, Paul. I'm thinking of when the GWH was built. I remember it being built. It wasn't that long ago. If the original architect went back and discovered they had redesigned A&E because the original didn't work, I wonder how he'd feel about that. How do you know whether one of yours has worked? Do you go back and ask people?
Yeah, we do go back. Obviously, when a project finishes, you usually have a minimum of a year. It's what they call the sort of rectification period. So if any bits go wrong, the contractor goes back. So after that year, we usually have a sort of regroup and do sort of like a post-mortem, if you like, on the project and lessons learned. So we do have a lot of key performance indicators to get feedback from those stakeholders, including the people that are using the building. And obviously, the recent sort of influx of social media, you get a lot more publicity in terms of feedback and out there in the public domain. Obviously, Southmead Hospital has just opened as well, which we have worked at Southmead before. And now that's open, you're getting comments coming through on Twitter and Facebook, and you get that right from the coalface, if you like, of the people using it.
Yeah, that's
sometimes negative, sometimes positive. But
instant feedback, whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
Okay, it's good to talk to you, Paul. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
No problem.
Paul Rogers.